Good day and welcome, America and the world. I'm Tom Donahue for Tom Donahue Reports Patriotism in Action. For many, this is perhaps the holiest or one of the holiest days of the year. And I want to explore and I want to explain some things that I think may be of interest to you. And I want to do it in the most respectful ways, but also a reality check and conveying to you what I believe to be true without offending your senses or sensibilities, especially during this very special time of the year for many. And I want to give a shout out and a salute, and I know it's somber, and I know it is a very painful time for those there in Connecticut. And I know many are suffering. And I understand that. But especially there, Sandy Hook and Westbury, and it just pains me to even have to think about what those parents and others are going through. I mean, all family members and that whole community, and it's just heartbreaking. But the broader picture, when people think of Christmas, it's Christmas. It's considering, and viewing the birth of the Savior, and not just a prophet, and not just a special person, but an actual Savior. And a being that came from God. I mean, it's part of God and God. But I'm not here to proselytize. Was he born on December 25th? I don't think there's a scholar that would say there's a scintilla of evidence to support that. And why was that specific date chosen? Well, because it coincided with what the heathens and what the pagans were celebrating. And so they decided, especially when I say decided, corporate religion decided that, well, it'd be a great day to recruit, and if it would coincide, and if we could in some way, make the heathens and the pagans more comfortable, then we can bring them to our religion. So the winter solstice and the sun god, and you see this with other holidays, Christian holidays in particular, Easter, Estar, and we've talked about that before, because bunny rabbits and the fertility god, and it's just ridiculous. But I always call it the resurrection, the celebration of the resurrection, the rebirth, and the rise from the dead. But let's stay focused and concentrate on Christmas, even though he was not born. And I've heard it debated. It was the spring. It was around the Feast of Tabernacles that would put it late fall, but not quite the winter. I'm not here to pick apart and even try to predict. The importance to me is that I truly believe that he was the Savior. I truly believe he is the Son of God and God, and I believe that any celebration that could bring you closer to the Creator God, and in my view, the Savior and the Son of God. And I think it's something to rejoice 24/7, 365. But that's just me. And so I've been torn, and I've kind of gone back and forth on this as to whether to say Merry Christmas, and even we know he wasn't born then, even though it's been so highly co-opted and compromised as a holiday, and so many falsities, so much fantasy and fiction and untruth telling as unfolded. that I said, you know what? I can still say Merry Christmas. I can still rejoice in the fact that there are some people, actually quite a few people, in the millions, that at least on some level are celebrating, the importance of Christ, meaning real Christmas. And I don't have a lot of I don't have a lot of angst. Well, I did for a while there, about parents that continue to perpetrate and propagate the falsehoods of the real true meaning of Christmas, and Santa and the reindeers, and all this other stuff that's going on, the snowman and Rudolph, and all these things that have really nothing to do with the actual day. It's called Christmas. Now, I know some people are offended by that. It's Happy Holidays. And I know people of the Jewish faith, it's more of a focus, on Hanukkah, and others in other faiths, Kwanzaa, and that's fine, great, wonderful. But there's this, I guess, if you want to go beyond the spirituality and the sacredness of the Savior, there is this spirit of giving and sense of community and family, and I think all those things are quite wonderful. So I've decided that rather than just separating myself from society and either judging or being hypercritical, or saying, I'm in the know and you're not, or I'm not, I don't have to celebrate the way others do, but I don't also have to be separated from society and family and friends because some of the commercialism and the consumerism and the falsehoods that overshadow the true meaning of Christmas has to get in the way of my relationships. And I guess when I learned a lot about health, natural health and healing, I did this, I kind of in the Patriot movement, and sometimes you just go full bore into something, and you feel like you become more or less an expert, and you feel like you have to, that everything has to be purity and absolutism, and then these people are going like, what happened to this person? Did he become a religious or a health nut, or whatever it might be? So rather than being an outcast or a pariah, and again, I'm not here to compromise on my integrity or my principles, and I'm free to share, and I do, whether it be through this broadcast or through my personal conversations or relations, I do. But some feel like they have to almost separate themselves from all of this, and so like even around Easter, a lot of times I'll say Happy Resurrection Day. And I might even get into a conversation, although not pounce on somebody, not do it with lots of angst or animosity or judgment or being, as I mentioned, hypercritical. So I think it's some, I guess you could say, some maturity in the last few years on my part, and to be able to still be a part of society, but also understand that I see things differently, and I have a certain experiential level and knowledge base and steeped in truth that I can share with people, that maybe I wouldn't turn them off. But I think so many people, whether it's the Patriot movement, the Truth and Liberty movement, or the health movement, or spirituality, that we come on too strong, and then we can't even have a conversation with people because they become very defensive and either reject or resent. And so I just want to kind of share some of my feelings as it relates to Christmas and the celebration of Christ. And I know someone say, well, there's no discussion of their commandment or edict that we have to celebrate. But there is enough written in the Bible about the nativity scene, Christ's birth, the stars, the heaven, the wise men, and the lead up to the birth, John the Baptist. And so, so there could be an argument made that we should be in some way recognizing or celebrating the birth of the Savior. And so there's a lot of different levels where you could say this is kind of a special time of year, but any chance I have to share and say, well, you do know that Christ wasn't born on this day, and you know that Jesus is the reason, really, for the season. And you can have a discussion about your faith and what that means to you and what you've learned, and so I just wanted to talk about that and I have. But back to and I'm not a parent, but if I were a parent, I would not. And you might say, oh, it's not fair to the children. I would not lie to my children and talk about Santa Claus. Now, I would tell them, don't judge other kids or other families, and don't spoil it for them. But let me tell you, that these parents are well-intended, and there is a whole genre of writing, or literature, I should say, that deals with fiction, deals with fantasy. Television, movies, there's a media, that, is, I would say at least half of what we see and hear and take in from the media, is designed, and I'm not talking about, news stories that really are fiction and not telling you the truth or the whole truth. And so I would try to explain it to them that these are customs and traditions and well-intended, but because the family unit that we have, I'm going to try to be always truthful and honest, and quite frankly blunt when it comes to any and all issues. And I'm not going to pervert the truth, and I'm not going to prevent you from learning the truth, even at an early age. And if it's an uncomfortable subject, or subject that I feel maybe it's premature to discuss, maybe like the facts of life, at too early an age, well, maybe we would, we'll address that at another time. So it's not just hey, kids are not going to be your necessarily your friends. You have to be the parent. And you just have to just tell them everything about everything too early on. But again, I think that there are some things that I think that if they respect you and they know that when you teach them and when you discuss things, they can count on you. They can trust that what you tell them, you're going to be a credible, reliable source of information, of education. That's the way I see it. So I would not personally want to engage in this form of fantasy and fiction. And when you look at Christmas, you got the secular versus the spiritual. And almost every family that gets involved in the gift giving, it has become so highly competitive in terms of the gift giving and the expectations and the pressure. Now, I was out today, and yeah, we got a little dusting of snow, and I felt so imposed upon because I was walking, and the traffic was so intense, and people were like rushing, up and down the aisles. I was picking up food items, not gifts, And I could just feel the tension, and so it was not a very comfortable feeling on Christmas Eve, and I really except for I did meet with a family member, and I had lunch, and I have to say that was pretty pleasant. We were in a booth, and it was the aquarium was in the background, and it was in a diner. And it's a pretty decent diner in the northeast Philadelphia. And I have to say that that was very comforting. And we discussed a whole host of things, but including spirituality. I have to say that, I have memories, and you can say, well, why would you want to deny or children of the memories you have? Well, they weren't all good memories. Some of them were. But I have to say, and again, you can say, well, hindsight. As a child, I was always curious, always wanted to know, and I really, I kind of felt let down. Like, well, why was I told these things? Why do we engage in these things? So even as a youngster, not only my curiosity, but I really, I wanted to know, why. I wanted to know the motivations, the intentions, and so I really felt like, and now looking back on those experiences, I have to say that if my parents had been steeped in a more solid spiritual foundation, I mean, we were raised, I guess you could say, we were raised as Catholics. I gave that up as I explained to my audience, on many occasions, for a variety of reasons. But I just want. I've always been on this eternal quest for truth in any and all things. I just simply need to know, want to know. I have to know. And that's what drives me to continue broadcasting, is because whether it's popular, unpopular, if I go against the grain, and I would never do it unless I really believe it and I mean it. And I know we're coming up towards the end of the year here, and I'm going to talk about some of the predictions that I made. And quite frankly, I'm not here to pat myself on the back, but if you look at my accuracy as it related to the primaries, the general election, the commentary as it pertained to a variety of news related issues, as well as the conspiracy and the fringe issues, I was pretty right on. And so most people that have tuned to my broadcast, whether it was during live streams, pre-records, however you have come about listening to this program, I think you'd have to say that, wow, he was pretty, it was foretelling and quite frankly, so far ahead of the curve. And I'm pretty proud of that. So I'm glad that I've learned some things over the years, that I think that I have a pretty good knowledge base, and I think that I have pretty good instincts, and I think I have been able to connect the dots, and I'm going to continue doing that. I'm going to have some very exciting news coming up soon here. I don't want to say anything during this broadcast, probably the next one, because there's a few more, speaking of dots to connect. But, it has to do with broadcasting. And it has to do with, I think many of you that have tuned to this program will be pleased with. And it's not a big deal, but it's going to be something that I think you'll appreciate. So this is, I just wanted to talk about, we're in this season. Jesus is the reason. The truth is as opposed to the fiction and the fantasy. If you look at the C for Christ versus the C for commercialism and consumerism, and just the fact is that, I know right now there's a lot of family gatherings, there's a lot of love, there's a lot of community and connection and common ground, and all those things are something to revel in. And so that all I hope and wish for is that you guys are connected to family. If you're a person of faith and you want to go and you really want to connect to Christ, I hope that's the case. And that I hope that, and if it's not Christ per se, it's the Creator. And I just hope that you guys are in a position or in a place where you are blessed, and that you're loved. And I just want to express my love and my appreciation for you and my connection that I have with you as fellow patriots, as fellow spiritual persons, or those of you that would profess to be Christian, or at least connected to the Creator. And I just wish you a great Christmas. I wish you a great holiday and just a great all-around day. I'm Tom Donahue for Tom